The first time someone whispers that a horror movie is based on a true story, it's easy to laugh it off, to shrug and say, yeah, right, just marketing. But those words carry more weight than you might think, because the most chilling horror films are often not exaggerations at all, but echoes of crimes so real, so grotesque, that they permanently scarred the towns and families where they happened. Imagine sitting in a dark theater, gripping your popcorn, and watching Psycho unfold, knowing that Norman Bates' obsession with his mother and his twisted habit of keeping her corpse were not inventions of Hollywood, but the shadowy legacy of Ed Gein, the quiet man from Wisconsin who turned his farmhouse into a graveyard of human remains. Police who entered his home in 1957 did not walk into fiction. They found chairs upholstered with human skin, bowls carved from skulls, a woman's face peeled off and preserved like a mask. He was real. He was ordinary. And he lived in a house that could have been next door to anyone. The sheer dread comes not from the gore, but from the realization that a man like Ed Gein shopped in grocery stores, held conversations with neighbors, and hid atrocities in plain sight, teaching us that the scariest villains don't come with glowing eyes or supernatural powers. They come wearing the face of normalcy. And the horror here is timeless, because every quiet farmhouse, every solitary figure in the grocery aisle becomes suspect. When the lights go out, the ordinary man in the corner of your mind doesn't feel ordinary anymore. He feels like someone waiting. But as disturbing as Gein was, he wasn't alone. Across the border in Mexico, another true crime unfolded that inspired the Silence of the Lambs in ways that audiences rarely understand. Dr. Alfredo Budgie. Trevico was not a grotesque, skin-wearing recluse, but a respected, clean-cut physician. His patients trusted him. His community admired him. And yet behind closed doors he committed surgical murders, carving apart his victims with the same steady hands he used to heal. Thomas Harris, the writer who gave birth to Hannibal Lecter, met him during his research. And the eeriest part of this encounter is not the blood spilled, but the charm Trevico exuded. He wasn't a monster in chains, drooling with madness. He was articulate, intelligent, and disturbingly polite. Even after prison, he returned to practicing medicine, and some locals never knew who he had been, what he had done, or how close they had come to lying beneath his scalpel as his next experiment. This duality, the healer and the butcher, creates a horror far more suffocating than ghosts or demons, because it asks a question that lodges itself like a splinter in the mind. Can you ever truly know the person standing before you? Every time a doctor leans over you in a white coat, every time you surrender yourself under the knife of anesthesia, the story of the real Hannibal Lecter whispers in the background. Horror lives and trust betrayed, and the doctor's steady hands are not a comfort, they are a threat, lingering in the dark hallways of hospitals where the walls smell faintly of antiseptic and fear. Then comes the Candyman. Not as an urban legend with a hook hand lurking in mirrors, but as flesh and blood in the form of Dean Corll, a name that still hangs like a curse over Houston, Texas. In the 1970s, Corll was known to neighborhood kids as a friendly man who owned a candy factory, a place that should have been sweet and safe, dripping with sugar and innocence. But what he handed out freely to children, those handfuls of candy, were the bait in one of America's most monstrous killing sprees. Allured boys charmed them, made them laugh, and then erased them in a spree of torture and death that claimed at least 20. The films and legends his crimes inspired make it easy to think of the Candyman as folklore, but the reality is darker, more suffocating. The real Candyman didn't live in Meruzi. Lived down the street. His victims vanished into a void of unimaginable suffering, their screams swallowed by walls and earth, their childhood cut short with no chance of escape. And here lies the horror. How many times do we trust the friendly neighbor, the man who waves from the porch, the one who offers candy to our kids on Halloween? How many times do we let them close, blind to the nightmare waiting behind the smile? It is not the monster in the shadows that terrifies most. It is the monster holding out something sweet, wrapping death in kindness. And the next time candy touches your tongue, the taste might carry a memory you wish you could spit out. But crime doesn't always end with bodies. Sometimes it opens doors. Sometimes murder leaves a stain so deep that it invites something else in, something that lingers long after the killer is gone. The Amityville house is perhaps the most famous haunted home in the world. And behind the Hollywood versions of bleeding walls and swarms of flies lies a truth that can be denied. Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his parents and siblings in their beds in 1974, and what followed for the next family that moved in blurred the line between crime and curse. George and Kathy Lutz claimed their home became alive with evil. Whispers in the night, furniture moving by itself, shadowy figures creeping in doorways, a stench of sulfur that clung to the air. Skeptics dismiss the haunting as fabrication, but even without the supernatural, the Amityville story is unbearable, because how can a family sleep in the same rooms where blood once pooled, where each creak of the floorboards echoes gunshots that ended lives too early? Haunted or not, the very bricks of that house are soaked in terror, and perhaps that is what the film adaptation got right. The true horror isn't whether the house was cursed by demons ZS. Knowing that you can never scrub murder out of walls. When you close your eyes in that house, you hear echoes of a family. It's a last breath, and the air tastes metallic, like rust, like blood. A house becomes more than wood, and painted becomes a tomb. A witness that remembers even when the living try to forget. And so these crimes Ed Gein, in his farmhouse of bones. The Dr. Lecter was born from the Candyman with his poison generosity, and the haunted house soaked in familial blood combined into a tapestry of truth stitched into horror films. Each case shows us that what terrifies most is not what might lurk in the shadows, but what already has. Horror films thrive because they don't need to invent. They simply translate what humanity already did, what crimes were already committed, what nightmares already unfolded. When you hear the phrase real-life crimes that inspired classic horror films, it should not feel like trivia, it should feel like a warning. The ordinary world hides monsters in plain sight, and no screen can contain them. No credits can roll to save you. And if you're still listening, if your stomach hasn't turned and your lights aren't already on, then dare to take the next step. Don't stop here. If your heart can stand it, go on to the next story waiting in the shadows. A tale more brutal, more suffocating, more real than anything you've heard tonight. The door is open. Step through it. If you dare.